What's up, guys? Finally getting around to doing that water video. I'm sorry it took so long. This has just been a crazy summer so far, very busy. And I had a bunch of footage about a month ago that when I got a new phone, I lost it all. So I've kind of had to start over, but that's all right. I have had a lot of questions about what I do for water out here on this micro ranch that we have. And that's a great question. I totally get it. Without having consistent quality water for your livestock, you really don't have much of an operation, or your operation is not going to last very long. So water is huge for the overall health of the animal. I think that's obvious. We don't need to talk about that. I have kind of been building up my system as we've gone. Every year I started with the bare minimum. I didn't want to spend too much money getting into it. It just kind of became something that I used what I had laying around our place. I used what we had out here from when my parents used to run horses way back in the day. And I've slowly kind of started building on that system. Now I will say straight up, if you want the answer right now for my opinions on what the best way to get water to your livestock is, that's underground piped water from a consistent water source, whether that's rural water that you're getting off the road that also runs to your house, or just a well hydrant. Having water piped underground that will flow in both the summer and the winter to various hydrant outlets throughout your property, no doubt about it, that's the best way to go. So let's get into it. I'm gonna start with what I started with and kind of work my way up from there. So the way we're set up out here on this ranch is, again, we're 10 acres and we've got one hydrant that pumps water from a well, and the well is super deep. We've only had a few years where it's run dry, and it's a very good, consistent, clean water source. The only issue is that one hydrant that we have is up closer to the front half of the 10 acres. So if you recall the way we're laid out, it's basically the road and the house and the barn and kind of all the building structure, the backyards, all that. Then we have that front pasture, that 2.5 acre front pasture. And then at the back half of the property, we have another 2.5 acre back pasture. And then we've got like 2 acres of woods, and there's a creek that runs through behind. But one of the issues that I had when I first got cows out here was, how am I gonna give them water when they're down in that back pasture? Because that hydrant is up by the barn in basically the front quarter of our 10 acre. That's a lot of garden hose to have to deal with. So we're lucky in the sense that where that well is located on our property is actually in that back pasture, and it's actually more towards the back of the back pasture. The well pit comes out of there, and this essentially became my second watering point. I tried to get a hydrant down there as a watering point. That didn't work. So then my next solution was, or my next issue was, how do I get water out of that well pit and deliver it to the animals down there? So this is what I came up with. Originally, I was looking at a gas-powered trash pump. So you might have seen them. It almost looks like a generator. It's like a little Honda motor surrounded by a frame that's got, I think it's like a 2.5 inch outlet on it. And it actually moves a good amount of water. It's used for like drawing water out of static sources, right? Ponds and creeks, stuff like that. The issue that I had is, one, they're expensive. Two, they're bulky to move around, and I didn't really want to spend the money on a quality trash pump, because you can get some lower quality stuff that's cheaper, just to sit it outside 90% of the year, because it was too heavy to move back and forth. The other thing is they're extremely loud, and a lot of the watering that I have to do, a lot of the care that I have to do with the cattle is really early in the morning before I go to shift. Sometimes we're talking 5 o'clock in the morning. And so even though we're about 10 acres back away from all the neighbors and the houses, the thought of firing up a gas-powered trash pump, which are not quiet in the least, at 5 o'clock in the morning, just didn't really work with me. So came up with another solution. I actually found it randomly. I was going to look at trash pumps. I was at Mills Fleet Farm, which is one of the big farm and ranch stores around here in central Iowa. And I was going to go look at a trash pump, and I stumbled across this thing, and it's awesome. So this is a 18 volt Milwaukee, basically battery powered transfer pump. So it uses the standard 18-volt battery that you see from any of the Milwaukee power tools. Just opens up, slides in there, and this thing is awesome. At the time that I bought it, and I don't think the price has changed, it was only about 200 bucks. 3/4 inch outlets for your hose, so it connects to a normal garden hose. Now, it's not the most powerful thing, obviously, because it's battery powered. According to Milwaukee's specs, it will lift up to 18 feet, so it'll draw out of the ground, or lift as it's drawing water out 18 feet high. They say it has a head height, so the max that it'll actually push water is about 75 feet. I'm trying to remember what the runtime was, and it depends on the battery. This is kind of the cheaper, the XC50. I think they said 240 gallons per hour on this battery. You can bump it up to 300 and something, 320 maybe, if you get like their 6.0, or even, I think they've got like a 10.0 at this point, which this battery bay actually will fit the larger, deeper battery. So it has the ability to move more water, but I think at its max with just the normal battery, they say it's about 8 gallons per minute. So not super fast, but what do I love about it? Obviously it's small, it's portable. I mean, I can carry this thing down. It'll fit in, truck, side-by-side, lawnmower, whatever. So if you have a kind of a distance to travel and you're bringing some other stuff down, this will obviously fit onto whatever you need to carry. It's quiet. That's a big thing. It's super quiet. It makes hardly any noise. It is a self-primer. So I did run into issues when I was using completely dry water hose, and when the pump itself was completely dry. So basically when they were up in the front pasture and it came time to go back to the back pasture, and I hadn't used this thing in a while and all my garden hose was empty, I did have problems, especially as that well height started going down. I did have problems getting a prime. I think the self-priming feature they're talking about is if you are using this to like empty a basement full of water, or if you're trying to get a water trough empty or something like that, where it doesn't have to draw water very high. So what I would just do at that point is I'd pour water in the pump, I'd fill the pump, and then I would take a bucket down and I would basically just draw out of the bucket, get the prime going, and then I would drop the hose down into the well. So the self-prime feature is really, really nice on that. I'm filling about a 50-gallon trough, and I would just leave this whole unit with the battery in there down in the back pasture for 3, 4, 5 days and get fills out of it before I'd have to swap out batteries. So I'll touch on what I don't like about it, and these are in no particular order. I mean, there's definitely some big things that I'm not a fan of, and then there's just some minor things. But the first one is that one of the same things I liked about it was it's battery powered. Very frequently, I would try and run that battery to the max, and again, that's just because I didn't want to have to cycle batteries all the time. And I would get half of a fill done, and my battery would go dead. So that's the other thing I don't like about it, is it obviously doesn't move a whole lot of water very quickly. It's a trade-off though, because again, it's battery powered, it's small, it's compact, it's easy to move. So you can't expect it to transfer a bunch of water very quickly, but if I had to do anything more than a 50-gallon trough, I don't think I would use this because it just takes forever. Part of that, again, battery powered, but then you're also limited by you're just using these 3/4 inch garden hose adapters. So even if it could transfer a lot more gallons per minute, even using one of the bigger batteries, you're limited by your intake and your exit size, right? You're just using a garden hose, so it can only draw so much water. And while we're on the topic of that garden hose, I definitely need to point out that it pays to have quality garden hose. If you use really cheap, really thin stuff, especially if that garden hose sits out in the sun, which I'm assuming if you're using this, it's because you're in an area that it's not convenient to get water to, so you're probably gonna leave your garden hose spread out. So it's gonna bake in the sun all day, make it really, really soft, and this actually does have enough power on it to collapse that garden hose. So that was another issue that I would constantly run into, is I would go to hook up my intake hose and it had been laying in the sun all day, and I go to turn it on and it starts drawing water, but it's also collapsing that hose as the suction becomes more and more, thus reducing. I mean, we're going from like 8 gallons a minute to like 2 gallons a minute. Like, it is taking forever just because it's collapsing that garden hose. And that's my own fault. I just used the cheap garden hose that I had around here. cheap hose sitting out in the sun all day connected to this thing, I mean, it'll suck it shut, and it takes forever. So that Milwaukee transfer pump worked great, and honestly, I ran it for about 1.5 years with 0 issues. I'd use that pump and garden hose, again, when I was in the back pasture. So I'd pull the cover off of the well pit, I'd drop a hose down in there, draw it up with that pump, shoot it out to my 50-gallon trough. Then when they came up to the front pasture, I would run garden hose or allow them a lane to get into the area that the actual hydrant connected to our well was connected to, and then I would water the animals that way. So I had a really good system. Front pasture, they used the well hydrant. Back pasture, they used that Milwaukee transfer pump. Now, last year was the first year that I had problems with it, and that was because of the drought. Getting the animals water in that back pasture with this pump eventually stopped working because the water level in the well pit got too deep, right? So they say, and actually I measured it because I wanted to see if Milwaukee was accurate. Again, they say 18 feet of lift. It was about 17 and a half feet that well dropped to before this little battery powered pump could no longer get the water out of there. So I had 2 choices at that point. I could go get that trash pump, again, spend the money on a fairly expensive quality gas powered trash pump and start drawing water that way, or because this really was in about mid-July, so we were about halfway through the grazing season, and I kept thinking at any minute fall was going to show up and we were going to start getting those rains. I was wrong. The rains did not come in fall. I didn't want to go out and spend a bunch of money when I thought I just needed a temporary solution to get me through the next 2 months. So that's where I switched to this. This is just a little 25-gallon Fimco, like garden tractor water tank and pump. So what I would do is I would fill this up either off of the house water or fill it up off of the hydrant, because the well hydrant, because the well was still operating. Obviously the pump for the well was very, very deep in the well pit itself. So I would fill this tank, and then I would drag this down with our small, older Toro 0-turn mower, and then I would use that transfer pump, that Milwaukee transfer pump, and I would just do the same thing I was doing for the well pit, except I would just drop a hose down inside there, draw it out, and use it to fill the trough. Now, this was extremely inconvenient, but like I said, I thought that I was just going to be doing this for like 1.5 months, 2 months. Turned out to be a lot longer, but it was inconvenient, obviously, because I needed a lawnmower or something to drag this down every day. And it ended up being twice a day, and if it was in the heat of August, it actually ended up being multiple times a day, because like I said, this is a 25-gallon tank, but I was doing a 50-gallon trough. So it would take 2 trips to basically totally fill that trough. So early in the morning, I had to fire up the lawnmower. Late in the evening, if I was moving them, I had to fire up the lawnmower. If it was raining, I had to fire up the lawnmower. If the grass was soaking wet from dew, if we had mud, because of a lot of rain, I still had to fire up that lawnmower, and it just was extremely inconvenient. I got that mower stuck more times than I can remember. Beat the hell out of it. It was super muddy. It just was not a usable solution. And we had a freak snowstorm in October, and I had to take that 0-turn mower out through like 1/4 inch of snow, and it was just a nightmare. If you have a need for it elsewhere, it could absolutely be a worthwhile purchase. But like I said, 25 gallons doesn't get you very far, and you are always reliant on something to haul it down to where your water trough is. So this is what I started using this year, and this is just a 40-gallon poly tank for water. Now, it didn't come with that hose or any of the connections. It was just a raw tank, but any of the farm stores that sell these tanks should also have all of the connections and the hoses there. You just have to kind of put them together and size what you want. 40 gallons, you can get these things all the way up to like 360 gallons. So this kind of brings me into my next evolution of where I'm at, and I'll tell you why I went with only a 40 gallon here in a minute, but just something to think about, that you can obviously put these on a cart on a mower if you need more, if you need more water than what that 25 gallon cart will hold. You can get a larger tank, put them in the bed of a pickup. You know, if anyone has seen those, they're called IBC totes. They're kind of those caged. They look just like this. They're a white tote, but they're in a cage, like an aluminum or a metal cage with pallet fork connection on the bottom of them, basically. IBC totes, you can get them in like 275 gallons or 375 gallon tote, I think. And if you have a tractor or a skid loader or something with a front end loader, that was actually my next solution, was gonna be grab one of those. I was gonna use our tractor with the pallet forks, take it down to the back pasture, and then basically do what I had been doing again with the well. I was gonna fill that 325 gallon tote, fork it, take it down, park it in the back pasture for however long it took me to get through there. And then I was just gonna use that battery operated Milwaukee pump to draw out of that thing. But this is what I'm using to haul that 40-gallon tank around, just a little Polaris Ranger. And it obviously has its limitations. It only has a 500-pound payload capacity, so we're already kind of getting there with that 40-gallon tank. So as our operation grows and we might have the need for more water, this is only gonna get us so far. So then that's where maybe we're thinking about, you know, a water tank in the bed of a pickup, or using like that IBC tote with 300 and some gallons in it and parking it back there. This is also going to be great for running those lease properties, right? So the property next door, the 4 acres next door, or that 19-acre lease that I got down the road, this is going to really come in handy with that tank, just to fill it up, zip down the road, or zip next door and unload it into the water troughs. So I'm actually going to have to turn this into a 2-part video. Our internet has gotten bad enough out here that if any of these videos turn into like more than 10 minutes long, it takes days to upload onto YouTube. So I'm getting ready to move the cows into the back pasture. They have one more day in the front pasture, then they're going out back. So in part 2 of the video, I'll actually show the water trough, you know, where I put it in relation to the grazing cells, how I move it around, stuff like that. So it kind of warrants its own video, I think. If you have any questions about what you saw in this video, shoot them at me, let me know, and I'll either get back to you right away or I'll try and put them in part 2. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll catch you soon.